whatever happened to predictability? The milkman, the paper boy, evening TV. You miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, everywhere there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, everywhere there's a love of somebody who needs you. When you're lost out there and you're all alone, life is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look, everywhere you
Hey Trinity students, you're about to watch week 2 of our Oh the Places You'll Go series. This week we learned from Bailey how sometimes what we've planned for ourselves can be different than what God has in store for us. And by spending intentional time with Him and praying to Him, we learn what He has called us to do. If you have any questions about any of this, or maybe you're trying to figure out what God has planned for you, we'd love to help you figure that out. Feel free to text us, or if you don't have our contact info, drop a comment below and we'll reach out to you. We love you guys, we miss you guys, we hope you're having a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
I was born and raised in a small town in north central Indiana, so not originally from Ohio. Ended up here for work, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Was born and raised in the church, and went to a couple different ones through when I was a toddler. And then finally we joined a Methodist church when I was in kindergarten. That's when I was baptized at that church, and it's still the church that my parents go to today, back in my hometown. So that had always been, faith had always been a part of our family, and what we had done growing up. So I have an older brother so I'm 29 and a half. So thanks to Linda, who texted me this week and wished me a happy half birthday. And I guess I missed Christina's half birthday was 2 days ago. So I'm 29 and a half. My brother we're 12 days apart. So my birthday is November 20th, and we're 2 years minus 12 days apart, not literally 12 days apart. I don't know. That would be like a God thing. That is not my first, that's not my first God moment when my brother and I were 12 days apart. So his birthday is December 2nd, which is the same day as Britney Spears. So for those of you that know Britney, her and my brother have the same birthday. So my brother and his wife were married 5 years ago, which I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But they now live in Mountain View, California. So just south of San Francisco by 45-ish minutes. So my parents are still back in the hometown that I grew up in, participated in youth group, all through, went to church every Sunday. Youth group was every Sunday night. Middle school was 4:30 to 6, and high school was 6:30 to 8 p.m. every Sunday night. I still remember that. There were 5 churches that participated because I grew up in such a small town. There were 5 of them in this downtown. It would be 5 of them in Upper Arlington, if you will, kind of all on the same street. And it was called Adams Street. So we were the Adams Street Kids, or ASK. ASK was the name of our youth group. So did that throughout high school. Even when I got my license and could drive, that was just kind of always what I did. We went on mission trips and whatnot. And a little bit different than here at Trinity, where there's kind of a smattering of kids, mostly from UA or Grandview, but some from some other parts as well. Everyone there, we all went to the same high school. We all knew each other. That was just who my friends were. So for me, it had just always kind of been a part of my life and growing up. Then I went to college, went to Purdue, a great school in the Big Ten. Great school. And kind of joined a church, started going to a church there, and got involved in a small group. But I'm sure Alan can attest to this as well. You just kind of things just feel right or they don't feel right. And so it kind of took me a while. I tried a couple different things and just couldn't really click with anything. And then my brother actually went to Purdue too. So like a couple of times, like right before the holidays and stuff, like we'd go to some services together. And then my senior year of college, my roommate at the time had gone to a church on campus called University Church. And it was, I think, like a Lutheran or Presbyterian church. But what I really liked about it was like a normal congregation. It wasn't all college kids. So I just like loved being able to go and see people that reminded me of like my parents, and like the sanctuary looked very much like the one at Trinity, and it was still on campus. But the fact that it felt more kind of like a home church to me. So then after college, I graduated and ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I worked full time for P&G. So did HR for them, and quickly joined Hyde Park United Methodist Church. So you may or may not remember when Wade joined here that he had been at Hyde Park, I think, as like an associate pastor or something, a couple years before I was. We never crossed paths, but did go to the same church at some point in time. And that for me was important. When I moved to Cincinnati, I had a handful of friends that I had met throughout my internship there, because I had interned with P&G the summer between junior and senior year, and then went back full time. So I had a handful of friends, but they weren't super like faith focused friends. They weren't like bad people or anything like that. I mean, they weren't like Aaron, but he's not even paying attention. But for me, that was a way for me to get connected, and just to find people similar to me. And it was less about even like community groups and whatnot, and just having kind of more of a community of people that were like-minded in the same way that I was. So started going to church there, and then one of the gentlemen, it was like a co-ed community group I was in, had reached out to me. He was actually the youth director, and he had just started in that role and had asked if I would want to be a counselor for the kids there, and said yes, because what else was I doing on Sunday nights? So got super involved with that program. And that was a really important community for me in those couple of years that I lived in Cincinnati. And even like as I moved to Columbus, still keep in touch with a lot of those folks. But at the time, so I had moved to Cincinnati in May of 2013. So now 7 years ago, which is hard to believe. Wasn't super happy with my job. Great company, but just the experience I was having, huge company, like itty bitty fish, like in this giant sea. And just overall, I felt like I just drew the short straw in a lot of aspects of, like, I'd interned and gotten rehired, and my manager that had hired me left, and then his manager retired. Like, everyone I'd kind of built relationships had left. The job they'd hired me into, they had eliminated through a restructure. So they like pieced together this job for me, and they were like, oh, here you go. We took one person's job and made it 2 jobs. So there wasn't like a ton of work. I met a lot of really good people there and like loved the brand and have like nothing bad to say about the company. It just felt like I had an experience that just wasn't what the experience everyone else had. And that's not to say like, it's just not everyone can have a perfect experience, and that's okay. I just think it was just too big for me, quite honestly. And so I wasn't happy there in terms of like my job. Like, I would come home and cry like a couple times a week. Like, I was crying more than I was like coming home and having good days at work, which was kind of a sign for me. But at the same time, I was also house shopping. So I'm not really sure why or how I ever thought, like, if I didn't like working there, why I should be buying a house in that city. So I'm not sure how that happened. Put an offer in on a house at one point. And then I also remember one day, like over my lunch break or after work, I went to the chapel at Hyde Park, and just like went and prayed. And I just was like, God, like, I don't know where you want me, but I don't think it's here because I hate it here. So like, not sure what your plan is, but like, can you try to like show me something soon? Because this ain't really working for me. But I remember saying like, God, whatever it is, like, let your will be done. Whatever it is that you want for me. Like, I'm trying to be patient. I'm like hanging on. If you want me here in Cincinnati, that's fine. Cause I just put this offer in on this house over here. So like, that's cool. But like, if you don't want me here, then like, we're going to figure it out. And anyways, I got a LinkedIn message from some folks at Wendy's, and I remember telling some friends at work, like, oh, I got this LinkedIn message from Wendy's. They have this job, and all my friends were like, oh yeah, we got that message too. Like, I'm sure they sent like a mass email out to all of these people, and I was like, well, I guess I'm like a fool, or call me a fool for like going and emailing them back, but I'm gonna see what it's all about. So I interviewed with them and like loved the experience I had in Columbus. I'd never ever been to Columbus until I interviewed. And then remember, it was in late April because my brother was getting married in June, and I was driving from here in Columbus to my aunt's house for my cousin, or my brother's future wife's bridal shower. So I had just interviewed. I was in the Bath and Body Works parking lot there on Sawmill and 161 because I'd picked up their gift from their registry. And I remember calling the realtor in Cincinnati, and when you buy a house, you tell them this is how much I'll pay you for it, and then they say, okay, we're going to do an inspection so you can figure out if there's anything wrong. They did the inspection, and there was asbestos in the house, and they had offered, which is anyways, it's like not good. It causes a lot of like issues with your lungs and whatnot, and it's usually found in older homes. And they were like, oh well, we'd have to bring out like a hazmat team to get it removed. And I was like, yeah, I don't want it. Like, that's just like way too much for me to deal with. And there's like, oh, there's other alternatives. And I'm like, nope, I don't want it. Like, get me out. Like, nope. Like, I'll sign whatever papers. I no longer want that house if there's asbestos. And so I got the job offer from Wendy's, and accepted that. And then luckily it all had worked out that there was asbestos, and I was no longer tied to the house in Cincinnati. So was all ready and set to come up here. So I'd put in my 2 weeks notice, told my boss Friday was going to be my last day. It was like literally 5 years ago. It was like May 29th, I think, or something. It was going to be my last day on that Friday. And then I was going to start first with Wendy's. So everything was all good. And then that Wednesday, May 27th, I called my dad and I said, hey, Dad. And it's weird. I never call my dad when like I'm at work or he's at work. So it was like odd that I would have called him anyways. And I was like, hey, are you excited to move me this weekend? Like, he said he was going to handle getting like the U-Haul or something. And so I called to make sure we were all set. And he was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to be moving. And I was like, okay, I'm not okay. Like, what do you mean? And anyways, he told me that my grandpa had passed away that morning, totally unexpected. And that was the last of my grandparents. So my dad's mom passed away before my mom even met her. My dad was like 25-ish or something. She passed from leukemia, and then my mom's mom passed away when I was like 2 or 3, and then my other grandpa my dad's dad when I was in like 5th grade, and then now I had just lost my final grandparent when I was 24. And so I was like, okay, well, I like immediately like didn't even think about like anything at work, just like ran up to my desk, grabbed my computer, my purse, and like left. Like called my boss, was like, I'm leaving. Anyways, like figured it all out, went home to be with my family, came back, like cleaned up my desk, like took care of everything that I needed to. But kind of like set into motion this like me realizing or looking back, like all of these pattern of events that had occurred. So like everything with the house and the job, and then my grandpa. And my grandpa passed on Wednesday. We had the funeral on Saturday. We buried him on Sunday, and then I drove immediately to Columbus. to start my job at Wendy's that Monday. So I like never even like stopped to like grieve. And then 2 weeks after that, on June 13th, my brother got married in Kansas. So that was my grandpa's birthday. So they actually got married on my grandpa's birthday, which is the way like it had all been planned. But the plan was for my grandpa to be there. Obviously that didn't happen. So just a lot of things in my life kind of all happening at one time. And I just felt like I didn't have any control over anything. And I was like letting go of so much. Like in a way I had like lost my grandpa. I had like not lost friends, but like in a sense you like become detached from people when you like physically move away from them. In a sense I'd like kind of almost lost my brother, like now that I had, my sister-in-law. And I just really wanted control over stuff. And so I found control in like food. And some of you guys have like heard this story before, but like I got to the point to where I was like, okay, well, I would like count calories so like addictively that I would like count how many grapes were like on a fruit kebab at Thanksgiving and like log it into like MyFitnessPal. Like literally like, okay, 3 grapes is probably like 1/8 of a cup, like, or whatever that may be. Like turn down opportunities to like meet up with people here in Columbus, because I had like anxiety about like going out and having to like eat like carbohydrates, like, or you don't know like what that chicken's made with, like what kind of butter and how many calories is in that butter. And it was like I would like I went to a training, I remember, for work, and it was overnight, and I had like packed this like nasty pudding stuff that I was supposed to eat on this like diet plan I had been on, like didn't go out to eat with like my coworkers and whatnot. And finally realized like I had an issue, and kind of like raised my hand and was like, I need help. And found a place here in Columbus, called the Center for Balanced Living, that had done a lot of work with those with kind of like disordered eating habits or like poor body image and whatnot. And that for me was a really strong reminder of like me being made in God's image, and like me trying to have control over all of these things was like never what God had intended. And I remember the therapist that I had worked with, and her name was Lindsay, and she was like fabulous. I loved her. And she was super like Christ-centered in everything that we did. And I remember she asked the question, like, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral, Bailey? She was like, do you want them to say like, wow, she was like the cleanest eater. Wow, Bailey always like ate 1,200 calories a day. That was so admirable of her. Or like, do you want them to like remember other things about you? And that for me was like a huge wake up of like who God had like designed me to be and who God had called me to be. And like, God didn't call me to come to Columbus so I could like eat carrots and count grapes and the number of blackberries I ate. And so that was like a really pivotal moment kind of in my faith, and like working through that and knowing like who God had wanted and called me to be. And then fast forward a couple years, and now we're here to 29 and a half year old Bailey. And God had different plans for me than Bailey had for herself. So I always thought that I would graduate college when I was 22, and I would be married when I was 24, and then I would have my first child when I was 26. Well, will be 30 in 6 months, and am not bearing a child, so and obviously I'm not married. So a couple years behind on all of that. So the last kind of 12-ish months or so have been an interesting kind of like time for me, I guess, in a way of just trying to kind of navigate like my plan versus like God's plan. And I'll remember like Linda and I had conversations even, and I'm going to start crying. Many of you know I was in a relationship for what turned out to be almost 3 years, with a person who I love deeply and still like love to this day, who he is as a person, but who we were together was just not, it just wasn't right. And Linda and I had conversations about that when we were in Texas. I mean, literally almost 2 years ago. And there had been a couple times when I felt like God was like trying to tug at me and say like, I don't know that that's kind of the right relationship. But in my mind, I was like, well, he at the time was like 33, 34, and like I'm 28, 29. Like, I mean, we're kind of running out of time here, God. Like, if not him, then what? Like, and anyway, so I just like really leaned in and was like, okay, I know like this isn't right, and I'm just gonna like call it for what it is. And made the decision then last fall that like this isn't right, and so we parted ways. And I was kind of like, okay, well, now here I am. Like, I just turned 29. Like, better get going. Like, time's running out. Like, I'm gonna be 30 in a year. And so I was like trying all these like dating sites and was like, I gotta meet somebody. And then realized that that's just not like, I see you laughing at me, Twaddle. That's not like who I am, like trying to like swipe right or left on these people. And so I'm just like really leaning into God's timing right now, and focused on like serving him and like his greater plan. And I'm trying to, I mean, in COVID, but then also beyond, kind of like two things I'm really focusing on in my faith right now is, one is like, as I think about like what I want people to say about me or about Christians in general, like I never want people to be like surprised when like, I don't walk into a meeting and be like, hi, I'm Bailey and I'm a Christian. But I want people to like, when they find out that I'm a Christian, be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Like in the way that she treats people and the way that she speaks and carries herself. And I don't want people to be like, oh, she's a Christian. I wouldn't have guessed that. Like the way she talks to people or talks about people or the way she treats other people. So I've been super focused on just like loving in the way that Christ loved and like serving in the way that he served. And so trying to like love unconditionally and like withhold judgment and like assume positive intent in people has been a big focus. And then for me throughout COVID, something I've really been leaning into is I've always struggled with prayer. Prayer for me has always been something, and this is like in all honesty, that like I don't know that I've always like understood like the vastness or like every aspect of prayer. I understand it as the way of, speaking to God and connecting with God. But like some people say, like, I believe in the power of prayer, and I don't know like what that means. And I think about it and I'm like, does that mean that if you get 250 people, like there's like different like levels like of donations, like sponsorship, like if you get 1,000 people to pray, like, so I've always just like have struggled with like, what exactly, is prayer, and why does God answer some prayers and not other prayers and whatnot. But one thing I do know is that I do think prayer is a way for us to not change the outside world, but for us to change the inside in the way that we are treating and taking on the outside world. And so during COVID, something I've tried to be is the answer to somebody else's prayer. And so I've, done things like I, sent out a bunch of cards to people I work with. So I work in HR and I work for Wendy's. So as you can imagine, like Wendy's restaurants, we own some of the restaurants, some of them are franchise, but I have like friends at work that like have to deal with every time if someone in a restaurant like shows signs of COVID or, managing all of that. And like some of our restaurants are in New York City and whatnot. So like I sent cards to my friends at work, just like, hey, I admire your leadership and I'm super excited to be on the same team as you. And and whatnot, and have tried to just reach out to people that I haven't talked to in a while. So like I have a friend who we went to high school together, and he's on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, which is the one that had like all of they had to stop in Guam because they had so many people on board that tested positive for COVID. So like reached out to him and just was like, hey, I'm thinking of you and praying for you, but trying to just like be a better friend in person and like be the answer to somebody's prayer. Because that's something like, how often are we just like, God, will you just show me a sign? Or I just want to know that you care, that someone cares. And so just trying to be that for people. So that, I guess, is like the 30-ish, almost 30 years of me and my faith. And so for me, it's been kind of always a part of my DNA and who I am. But I've definitely had moments in my life when I realized and kind of leaned into God more than in other moments. But I'm certainly still growing. I don't have all the answers, and I'm still learning every day, but I strive to, be, like I said, be the type of person that like when people think of a Christian, like I want them to think of me in the way that I treat others, except for Phil Richter and Aaron Steinke. And that is all in good fun. So that's me. Is that what you wanted to know about me? Is there anything else, any other questions you have about me?
I'm just a little upset you never talked about Bentley.
So that's a funny story. So I had wanted a dog, like literally for the longest time. Like I remember being like a senior in high school, and did you guys ever do like Relay for Life? Like the cancer, like collect money and like, or collect pledges and like walk. Someone brought like a stray puppy there, and I remember like asking my parents if I could have him, and they like considered it, but my friend ended up taking the dog. His name is Wayne. I think Wayne is still living. So I've like literally wanted a dog forever, and would like always check on like Pet Finder, and my friend and I in Cincinnati would always go to PetSmart when they had like the adoption pets out there. And is my friend Alex, so he's a male, so we'd always pretend we were a couple and we lived together, and we'd like tell them that we wanted to like try out the dogs. So we would always like play with the dogs and like, oh no, we think this one's like a little too rambunctious for like our apartment or like whatever. And anyways, and I don't know, I remember seeing Bentley, and I don't know I remember texting Aaron. It was between Bentley and some other dog, and the other dog looked like he was about to die. And I don't remember his name. And I was like, Aaron, would you babysit these dogs? And if I got one? And Aaron was like, well, I would, Bentley. I don't think the other one. I don't remember exactly. But Kyle, the guy I was dating at the time, had never had a dog. He's like, I'm not kissing it. It's not kissing me. But like, I'll take you to go get it. Cause I was like, it was in Wilmington, and I didn't want to drive an hour. And like, I didn't know how much he was going to like jump around and whatnot. So Kyle drove me, and I got him. And we were supposed to meet Kyle's parents for dinner in Wilmington. And Kyle's mom, like, is terrified of dogs. And so he called his mom and was like, hey, we like left earlier than we thought, and we were going to stop at the outlet mall, but then they didn't have what we needed. And so we're just going to drive all the way to Cincinnati. So we'll just like pick up pizza or something. Like, you guys don't need to come to Wilmington. And like, oh, by the way, we like have something with us. And anyways, we showed up at his parents' house and like brought this dog in, and his mom is like obsessed with Bentley. She hates all dogs except for Bentley. Literally to this day. She'll like text me, and I'm like, it's kind of weird, but
I just felt like since most of us had met him, we need to know where he came from.
Yeah, so that's a story. I felt really bad though because he had a brother, and I didn't know that until I adopted him. His brother was like a Chihuahua or something, but I felt bad because then I had to separate. I mean, she like told me when I was like in the room with him, and at that point, like I was not about to bring home 2 dogs.
Right. That's funny.
So
I just want to go back to like what you were talking about earlier. I think sometimes you were talking a lot about how you had to let go of different things, whether if it was a job or relationships or just control in general. I think when we think of letting go, we feel like we're quitting. When in reality, sometimes we make those tough decisions to let go, whether it is control or of what we eat or who we're with, whatever it is, that we allow room for God to be able to work in ways that we might not have realized otherwise. Or also what you were talking about, maybe we learn how God is using us to answer someone else's prayers, which is definitely a cool thing to get to be a part of. And so like we said last week, the point of this isn't just to, I mean, yeah, we want to hear about like where everyone got their pets and all that fun stuff. But the point of this isn't just so you guys know all the things that happen to us in our lives, but hopefully something that we'll say either now or later on in your life, you'll be able to relate to and see how God can work in things that we might not always expect that he will work in. Sometimes we're in difficult situations and we feel like there's kind of no point to it, but as Bailey mentioned, like every part of her journey has led her to where she's at now and what she has come to learn about God and how it's grown her relationship with him. And so also throughout the series, we're hoping that you guys will be able to recognize and identify your own faith journey. And if you ever have questions about that or what that looks like, feel free to ever talk to any of us about that. That's why we're here. But Bailey had also talked about how she wanted whenever someone meets her to, when they learn that she's a Christian, for them to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so now she has all these things in her life that she's able to tell someone, hey, this is why I believe in God, because I prayed for him to help me out in a difficult situation where I wasn't happy and he did. And now look where I am now. And so by able to tell people those things, it's going to let them not only learn more about you, but learn more about who God is. And if they don't know who God is and that's how they come to learn about him, then that goes back to being the answer to someone's prayer, you know? So, and we also just want to all get to know each other a little better during this mess. And we thank you for creating ways for us to gather, even in difficult situations. God, as this continues to go on and this sort of becomes our new normal, we may feel a sense to try to just make the best out of every day and try to just adjust to our new circumstances, God. But we ask that you just help us remember that it's okay to still have difficult days. It's okay to still have mixed feelings as this continues to go on. And we just ask that you provide us strength and comfort, especially as things are maybe uncertain with businesses reopening and just getting a new normal. God, we ask that you just help guide us to make smart and healthy decisions. God, we lift up all these prayer requests that were mentioned and all the ones that were unspoken. And we just want to celebrate the end of the school year, our high school graduate. And God, we're looking forward to be able to celebrate all those things together again. In your name we pray, amen.